Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is a reading roundup. In these videos I just talk about the books that I've been reading recently, and I've got a nice little stack here in front of me, so I'm just gonna dive straight in. I've been reading the Rosalind Thorne series by Darcie Wilde. It's a historical mystery series set in the Regency era, and I really love the Regency era for historical mysteries. And the newest one in the series is this one, A Counterfeit of Suitors. Nope, A Counterfeit Suitor, sorry. Okay, this one was great. It's funny with this series, some of them I really love, some of them are just okay. But I think that's how it goes in a series, but this one I did really like. So, our main character is Rosalind Thorne. And I'm just going to read you this first bit because it describes the series and the concept behind the series really well. Among the ton of Regency London, one breath of scandal can be disastrous. Enter Rosalind Thorne, a young woman adept at helping ladies of quality navigate the most delicate problems in this charming mystery series inspired by the novels of Jane Austen. So, I don't want to give away too much because this is the latest in a series. I think it's the 10th, maybe, something like that. Oh no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's only the 5th. I thought the series was longer. Anyways, so Rosalind is single. Her mother is dead and her father is away with her other sister. She's on her own, essentially. And in order to make a living, she kind of handles discreet matters for upper class women. But in this one, her father gets himself into an awful lot of trouble, and she had to, you know, try and help. I just really enjoyed it. I thought the mystery was good, the story was good. I enjoyed learning more about the characters, and there was a really kind of funny connection to the Count of Monte Cristo. I've started reading the Count of Monte Cristo as a read-along with Naomi and a number of others, and it starts in 1815 and Napoleon has been banished to Elba, and so I've been reading this book, you know, slowly throughout the month of June, and in this one Bonaparte is mentioned, although by this point it's a little later, and by this point he's on St. Helena. So it's not exactly the same time period, but it's pretty close, and so I just thought that connection was interesting. Now, stay tuned because there will be further connections to the Count of Monte Cristo. And then I read a cozy mystery. I've really been enjoying this Mr. Monk series. I love the TV show Monk. It's so entertaining. I find it funny. I like the mysteries. I love the characters. It's a comfort watch for me, for sure. And I've really been enjoying the books as well, written by Goldberg. And this one is Mr. Monk in Outer Space. This one was, again, fun. There was a convention for this science fiction show that had gained quite the cult following, and a man is shot in like the front driveway to the convention, and he's shot right on camera. It's all caught on the security cameras, but the man who shoots him is dressed in a costume of one of the characters from that science fiction show. And so therefore they have no idea who it is. And so, you know, they have to investigate. And Monk is just horrified by this convention, and he can't understand how people would get so obsessed with something so silly, which is a little bit ironic considering some of the things that Monk is obsessed by. One thing I did really enjoy was his brother Ambrose makes an appearance in this book, and I love Ambrose. Ambrose is agoraphobic, and he hasn't left his house in 30 years, and Monk and Natalie have to go and see him for part of the investigation, and they end up staying there for a while. So I like having Ambrose in the story. I really enjoy these. They're narrated in the first person by Natalie, his assistant, and they're just great, cozy mysteries. And then I read the second last in my Elizabeth I historical mystery series. I've been reading this for a little while. It's part of my personal reading challenge that I gave myself last year. And this is The Fatal Fashion by Karen Harper. In this one, it is 1566, and Elizabeth Tudor is getting some opposition from her parliament for ruling the country without a husband. They're starting to get really into her to marry, that she needs to marry. Another big part of this was, so it's been a little while since I read this one, so I had to look at the back to remind myself. She's also been very interested in this there's a new fashion for ruffs, which are famous, and so of course she's wearing a ruff in the picture on here, and they needed to be starched, and so this was a new fashion and a new way of doing things, and so there were specialized people to do it. And one of the ones that she was really interested in helping out, because she was a woman, is found drowned in a tub of starch. And so, you know, they need to investigate. I really enjoyed this one as well. I love the historical detail that she puts in. I always find it very interesting, and I enjoy the characters and getting them to know them a little bit better in each successive book. And I've only got one more left now to finish this series. And then for Christie Fest, Julie from The Hungry Bookworm and Lil from Lil's Vintage World run Christie Fest over on Julie's Discord. And I've always wanted to be involved because I love talking about Agatha Christie. But I've also been doing my Agatha Christie read-through project, and it's never worked out that the book that I'm on or I'm close to in the project is the one that they're discussing. And I finally caved and decided to just read that book to have that discussion, because I love talking about the books with that group over there. And so even though this book, I'm nowhere near it yet in my read through, I decided to go for it anyway. And so I read Sleeping Murder by Agatha Christie. This is the last Miss Marple. What's interesting about this one is that she wrote this one and Curtain, the last Poirot, during the war, during World War II, and then it was put away in a vault to be released after her death. And I'm so glad that she did, because that means that she wrote the last Marple at the height of her powers, and I really did enjoy this one. But I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to save that till I get to it in my read-through project. But I enjoyed reading this, and I really enjoyed the conversation that we had over on Discord. And then I read also the newest out in the Slough House series. This is Bad Actors by Mick Herron. I don't want to say too much because, again, this is like the 6th or 7th book in the series. But it's about MI5 in London, and you have active agents who work at Regent's Park, and then you have the disgraced agents called Slow Horses who work at Slough House, and they are led by the fantastic character of Jackson Lamb. He is quite the character. But briefly, in this one, there is a scandal brewing at MI5 headquarters that could disgrace the entire intelligence community. A specialist who advises the Prime Minister's office on how policy is likely to be received by the electorate has disappeared without a trace. So you've always got multiple things going on, and then they all kind of come together. And I just loved this one. And I marked a passage because it was kind of indicative of why I love this series. The way that he writes, the way that he tells his story. He tells a story of spies without being graphically violent, overly violent. There is, of course, a little bit, but I really can't handle too much violence in my stories, and this is just enough for me to get the seriousness of situations without, graphic, disgusting stuff. Although there's a little bit of it. But anyway, so I wanted to read this passage to you because I just thought it was fantastic. So it's towards the end, but I don't think there's anything spoilery in it. The man who'd been scaling the car's bonnet was a bloody mess, his face mashed into the crumpled windscreen inches from Whelan's own. He remained there while whoever had just landed on top of him slid sideways onto the gravel. Glass was falling from the sky, glistening like snowflakes, turning the scene into a zombie nativity, except that instead of gathering round like adoring shepherds, the gobsmacked crew that had surrounded the car were fleeing like frightened sheep. Whelan's hands were trembling. His whole body felt scraped to the bone. Dimly, through his now barely connected windscreen, he understood that a new noise had joined the raucous soundtrack, a bass-like whomp-whomp overhead that was possibly the wrath of God. So yeah, I am a super fan of this series. I really do enjoy it. Okay, and then I've been waiting and waiting for this book to come out because it is the newest book in my absolute favorite historical mystery series. This is When Blood Lies by C.S. Harris. This is the Sebastian St. Cyr series, and it is a Regency era historical mystery series that I just love. So again, I don't want to give too much information because this book is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17th in the series. But what I loved about this one is it really advanced this ongoing plot line that has been throughout the entire series, and that is of Sebastian trying to find out more about his mother. His mother left their family when he was a child, and he just never really knew what happened to her, and he just really wanted to know. And so this one really advanced that plot line. And the other thing that made this one fantastic was that it was set in France in March 1815. And so here is the other connection to the Count of Monte Cristo, because in this book Napoleon Bonaparte has been exiled to Elba, and so it's the exact same time period as the early events of the Count of Monte Cristo. And in this book, so Napoleon, the war is over, Napoleon's been banished, and so British aristocracy have felt they were able to go back and visit Paris. They hadn't been able to visit Paris for years, and so people were flocking to Paris. Meanwhile, there was also this big convention happening in Vienna. World leaders and politicians were there trying to come to some kind of an agreement, and so they thought, Sebastian and his wife Hero figured this is a great time to go to Paris and see if Sebastian can find out any more information about his mother. So that's why we have them in Paris. I love that it's a different setting for this book. I adored it. I loved it so much. And there was so much interesting information in here. And she was able to include this information that she learned during her research so naturally into the story. Sometimes when that happens, I feel like I've stopped reading the story and I'm now reading an essay, and sometimes authors just are not able to naturally put what they've learned in their research into the story. But C.S. Harris managed it, and it was so fascinating. There was a character in here who is the executioner, and so we learned a little bit about how that's a hereditary position, and how the guillotine was actually invented by someone who wanted a more humane way of executing people. And it was just such a different way of looking at the guillotine, especially post the revolution, post the terror. It was fascinating. There was a scene also that took place in the morgue, the city morgue, which had been developed because of Napoleon, and a better way to get people identified, to allow dead people to be identified, but it had become a tourist attraction, and it was actually in the guidebooks that this was a place that you could go and visit. And so when Sebastian goes to the morgue, he has to get past this huge line of people who are there to visit. They want to see the sights. Crazy. There was just so much rich historical detail in here that I was fascinated by. And then you also had this deeply emotional and personal story for Sebastian that was playing out, and I just loved it. And now I can't believe I have to wait another year for another one. I might just have to go back to the beginning and reread the series again while I wait. Okay, and then I read the second one in the Crown Colony series. This is the Betel Nut Tree Mystery by Ovidia Yu. This is a historical mystery set in Singapore in the 1930s. It is, the book opens December 1937. King Edward has abdicated the throne for Mrs. Simpson, and our main character, Su Lin, she is now working as a secretarial assistant for the newly formed detective unit. She is working for Chief Inspector Lefroy. She really wants to become a journalist. That's her goal in life. She's still quite young. I don't think she's 20 yet. And she also has a limp because of polio that she had when she was a child. Anyways, a British citizen, Victor Glossop, has announced his marriage to an American widow, Mrs. Nicole Covington, and they're there visiting Singapore, and that's where they want to get married. And then, of course, Victor ends up dead in his hotel room. And this was another really fun mystery. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the historical aspect that came out, the pieces that came out of what Singapore was like at that time period for the people who lived in Singapore, and for the British people who were coming over there. What also makes it so fascinating is just like the blend of people from all over the place. So, you know, Su Lin, her family is Chinese, but she's best friends with a girl whose father is from India and her mother is Scottish. And so I just love this blend. And then you also get this group from America because, of course, Victor is going to marry this American widow. And I just loved that melting pot and what that meant and what it looked like in 1937. So I'm excited, and I've already got the third one from that series coming to me from the library. Okay, and then I finally finished my Oscar Wilde short story collection. I've been buddy reading this with Donna from Studio in the Library, and that has just been really fun. So we finished out this book by reading The Ballad of Reading Gaol, which is a poem, which was fine. It was okay. I don't really love poetry, and I don't know exactly why. I just don't. But it was certainly interesting, and it was in Oscar Wilde's, you know, classic, fantastic writing style. The one thing I found really interesting, and I learned this from Donna, is that it was based on a true execution. Like in the poem, he's talking about someone who was being hanged at the jail, and this happened when Oscar Wilde was in Reading Jail. So I thought that was interesting, that it was based on true events. And then we also read The Portrait of Mr. W.H., which was okay. It was about these people who were trying to figure out like this conspiracy with Shakespeare's sonnets. And I'm really not that big of a fan of Shakespeare conspiracies, so it was okay. But I am happy to say I have finished my Oscar Wilde short story collection. And then last but not least, I read Suffragette Girl by Margaret Dickenson. This was on a recommendation from my mom. Not this book in specific, but the author. She's been reading Margaret Dickenson, and so I grabbed this one. Our library only has a few by her. So this is set in England. It starts in 1912, maybe. Hang on, let me check. Yeah, well, yeah, so it starts at the very end of 1912 and at the beginning of 1913. And the main character is Florence Maltby, and they live in the north, and her father really wants her to marry Gervais Richards, who has the estate next door. Her father thinks it will be a great match, and they'll be able to combine the estates, and it'll all be fabulous. But she's not interested. She's known Gervais her whole life, and he feels like a brother to her, and so she doesn't want to marry him. He does, on the other hand, however, really love her. And so that was, you know, that's kind of a sad part of the story. Anyways, she goes to London with a good friend of hers, Isabel, and she ends up joining the suffragette movement. And then, of course, that is curtailed with the arrival of World War I. And so she ends up training to become a nurse and then going over to the front in France as a nurse. Meanwhile, her brother, her younger brother, James, has been basically shamed by their father into enlisting early. He's only 16. And so he's there as well. And yeah, it was an interesting story. I really enjoyed the suffragette parts. And of course, the war on the front in France and being a nurse, while also, you know, trying desperately to find out what's going on with her brother and Gervais and Isabel's husband Timothy. And yeah, so it was a good story. I didn't love it, but I did enjoy it. And so that's Suffragette Girl by Margaret Dickenson. So there you have it. That's what I've been reading recently. Have you read any of these books? I would love to chat with you about them in the comment section down below. And I will see you for another video soon. Bye.